Right.
Right.
Well, actually, I didn't go through there. I see 3 steps as being in quality intellectual work. And I'm using a definition that was developed by a man named Anthony Burke, who is at the University of Chicago and is now, I think, at Stanford. And he's one of several people looking at what goes on in schools, and he was investigating actually in Chicago elementary and secondary schools how often are kids asked to do quality intellectual work. Well, unfortunately, his result was virtually never. And I think that if you think about it, one of the problems in many universities and colleges is more often than not, students are not doing quality intellectual work, and therefore they really aren't, what they are doing doesn't end up having a great deal of meaning. Quality intellectual work means that you are actively, that there is a construction of knowledge that actively involves the learner in developing his or her understanding. You use a guided or a disciplined inquiry. That means that you don't just sort of randomly throw out questions, but you throw out questions that make sense in terms of what it is you're wondering about. And the really important part is that the discourse, products, or performances that come out of this have a value beyond the classroom. So you're not doing this to pass the test. You're not doing this to get into Harvard or into Western Michigan or anywhere else. You're doing it because this has some kind of meaning for you. And of course, that means you're like,
that can be men as well. So here's a Mary, you have to take over again.
So you remember that triangle? I said that there was around inquiry is the idea of quality and intellectual work. There's learning, but then there's also play. And I heard you say this earlier today, Dale, that you played for 28 years at Argonne and then went to administration and quit playing. And I know that Gordon feels the same way, that he's spent most of his life playing. Well, now I'm in a field where play is right at the heart of the matter, right? And what is play? I've come to realize that play is quality intellectual work because it has absolutely the same components. I call it the SIP principle. Play is satisfying. It means something to you. It's intentional. You choose to do it. And that means that you choose to persist in doing it, which is a very important quality for problem solving, right? That you keep on trying, even if it's failure. You will say, oh, you're having fun. If you look at children playing, they aren't grinning very often. Go back and watch a child at play. A child at play is very serious, but very, very deeply engaged. And that's because it's intentional. You choose to do it. It's something which is important to you. And most of all, it's problem solving. And that's again, what happens in far too many classrooms at every level, is that instead of inviting problem solving, we impose solutions that may or may not make sense to the learner. And the learner has no ownership of what they're doing. But if you are engaged, if it's your problem, and you're coming either to the same answer or to a slightly quirky one that's not quite the same, then it is satisfying and intentional to you.
Yes, so we believe every child is a scientist at play, right? You were when you were a child. And we're still, most of us are scientists. I think we're still children at play, right? That's what we do in our labs, and maybe even when we're doing theoretical calculations. So how about doing an experiment now?
Okay, this is a story that I imagine many of you are familiar with, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Everybody familiar with it? the Papa Bear and Mama Bear and Baby Bear, their porridge is too hot, so they go out for a walk, and this little girl comes in and she makes havoc at the house, and the bears come back and they notice all that's wrong, and eventually they come upon Goldilocks and she wisely scurries off. It's a very interesting story. But our granddaughter Simone was just over 3 years old, and she'd heard the story a couple times, and she'd heard it one morning, and when her father picked her up a few hours later, she said, "Daddy, I figured out what the problem is with Goldilocks." And so he said, "Oh,